Okay, before I start talking, hopefully not to myself, can I get a head nod from Maya or Georgia? Let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah,
Okay,
I can hear you.
perfect. Okay, so this time I'm not the disembodied head. I am Crystal Corbray, the Programming and Marketing Librarian for Yakima Valley Libraries. I want to thank everyone for joining us for the first event in our 2021 Authors Out Loud author series. This is the first time that we've done this series virtually. We actually had to cancel it last year, so it's awesome that so many of you were able to join us tonight, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Tonight's speaker is Maya Sharma. Georgia Reitmeyer. Georgia, can you wave at the fine folks? She'll be running the facilitated discussion with Maya. She'll also be starting us out with an introduction, after which Maya will do a brief reading. We'll get into the facilitated discussion, and then we'll wrap things up with an audience Q&A. For the purposes of the event tonight, we're just asking that you type any questions that you have as the event unfolds into the chat feature. And for the Q&A portion, we'll actually read your questions aloud. We are recording tonight's session, so if anyone has any issues with that, you just may want to keep your cameras off, but that's just a fair warning on our part. So for now, I just want to hand this off to Georgia, who's going to do an introduction for Maya. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Like Crystal said, my name is Georgia Reitmeyer. I am a managing librarian here at Yakima Valley Libraries. And in keeping with what Crystal said, I want to welcome everyone to Authors Out Loud 2021. Thank you for joining us to meet Maya Sharma. Maya is a student at Eastside Preparatory School in Kirkland, Washington. She has won several prizes in science, math, essay writing, and arts at school, state, and national competitions. Her book, Paving, Conversations with Incredible Women Who Are Shaping Our World, was inspired by a 2018 interview she conducted with the female mayor of Issaquah, Washington. Over the intervening 3 years, Maya was afforded additional opportunities to interview other extraordinary women leaders from around the world, including New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Nobel Prize winner Dr. Yonath, Olympian Lindsey Vonn, and many more. Each interview covers the experiences, determination, and insights of the women that Maya profiled, offering profoundly valuable glimpses into their life journeys, their worldviews, and their guidance for the next generation of leaders. It's our pleasure to have Maya here with us tonight to talk about working with and learning from these incredible women. Maya, welcome.
Hi, Georgia. Thank you. And thank you for that lovely introduction. So I guess I'll start reading that passage from the introduction of my book. So this is from, like I said, the intro, and it kind of talks about the introduction of my story is kind of the story of how I went about doing these interviews, and the story of how I was kind of inspired to start this process and this book journey. So this first part that I'm going to read is my experience at the Women's March, which was one of the things that inspired me to write the book, but I think we'll get into that later. I've always been a feminist. I've always believed women are equal to men. I've always questioned the ignorant belief that women are less intelligent and capable than men. I've always wanted to make change in the world. Sitting in my chair at my desk with a terrible posture and dim lighting for a project, I scroll through the latest articles of women being poorly treated in Eastern Europe. I keep asking myself over and over again, why? I never quite found a way to express my feelings for this until one fine morning in 2017, January 21st, 2017, a Saturday. My dad had told me 2 or 3 days prior to the 21st that there would be a women's march. And though I truly supported the causes, I was never quite fond of marches. I repeated to my dad, I have too much homework. I don't want to go. But the next day, he somehow convinced me, and we drove to Seattle. It was a very cloudy day, as it always is in Seattle during the winters. Bundled up in layers of clothing and warm garments, we walked to the march. Since we'd never done a march before, we just jumped in the middle of the march to the Space Needle, Seattle's iconic landmark, and we started walking. I was wowed, I was amazed, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I know that when people have a passion for things, they do whatever it takes to get there, but honestly, I'd never seen anything like what I was seeing that day. All around me, men, women, children, friends, and even the people that worked inside the nearby stores had come out on a cold Saturday to this women's march. Big signs and banners encompassed me. No one is free when others are oppressed, one of the signs read. Respect our existence or expect our resistance, another read. Hear me roar was one of my favorites. No words, picture, video, or sign will ever be able to represent what I felt that day. We made our way through the crowd of 175,000 people. Yeah, that's right, 175,000 people. So as you can tell, I was quite amazed by this crowd. However, I still kind of wanted to be at home on my chair, working on my homework. But then the wave came. Not the wave that you see at football, basketball, or baseball games, but the screaming wave. It started in the back of the parade, and a few minutes later, people only a few feet behind me were screaming. I freaked out thinking someone was hurt, but as I turned around, I saw smiles on their faces, on all their faces. Then the people that were right on my tail were screaming as well. I turned right, people were screaming. I turned left, people were screaming. I didn't know what to think of it, but I didn't scream. I looked up at my mom, who had also come. She was smiling. She didn't scream, but she was smiling. She saw my face and started laughing. What was that? I asked her. She responded, I have absolutely no clue. I looked at my brother, who had the same reaction as me, confused. Whatever that was, I've got to join it next time, I thought to myself. Within a matter of minutes, I started hearing the scream wave again. When the wave of screams got to me, I screamed. But it wasn't a restricted one. It wasn't the scream you do when you get new clothes or a Christmas present or the joy of your uncle and cousins coming over. It was something else. I let all my emotions out. Everything that I had, all the anger I'd collected from reading women, mothers, and sisters being mistreated, being taken advantage of and abused because they were female. All the sadness I had jumbled up into a heavy rock of emotions that sat in the corner of my stomach, and all the happiness I'd gotten from seeing all these people at the Women's March to support women. It all went into that scream. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Slowly, one footstep after another, I was becoming more and more excited to be there. So that's the end of it's not the end of the introduction, but that's the end of the passage that I chose to read. And after that passage, I kind of go on to talk about the rest of my experience at the Women's March. And then also, I guess we'll get into, Georgia, you'll get into this later, but I was writing for my school newspaper, so I kind of talk about that too in the introduction. Oh, I think you're muted, Georgia.
I don't know technology. I just wanted to say that was really exciting, and that I could see why that would be inspiring for you, which sort of brings us to our first question about what was your inspiration for writing the book?
Yeah. So there were a couple of events that inspired me to embark on this book journey. One of them was the Women's March, which I just described. I think the Women's March was really what opened my eyes to, because I went in 2017, and I think I was in middle school at the time. And so I really only cared about my schoolwork and my friends and my family, and what was happening in the world. The news didn't really enter my little bubble. And so when I went to the Women's March, that event really opened my eyes to this world of girls' empowerment and women leadership and girl power, but also the downside, like gender discrimination, gender inequality, sexism, the barriers that women face at work daily. And so I was also writing for my school newspaper, which I mentioned. It's called the Eagle Eye, and I still write for it. But so for that, I needed something to publish for the next issue that was coming out. And the mayor of Issaquah, the city I live in, had just been elected. So I decided to reach out to her and do an interview, and it went great. And I published that in the school newspaper. And after our conversation, she recommended that I reach out to a couple more female politicians. So I took her advice, and I reached out to Senator Patty Murray, Senator Maria Cantwell, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Mayor Jenny Durkin, and I published all those interviews in my school newspaper. And then I kind of decided to branch out into other domains, like filmmaking, journalism. And so I spoke with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Ashley Parker, who works at the Washington Post. You might have heard of her. She comes on TV sometimes. And then I think after that, that bunch of interviews was when I really realized I wanted to write a book to share the stories of these women with more people than just, my peers at school. And so that's when I really branched out into other domains that are in the book.
Awesome. So that sort of leads me to my second question. And then in addition to that, kind of a two-part question here. So how did you decide which women you wanted to interview? And what was the process behind reaching out to these, to the women and asking for an interview? Because I bet that was interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So the way that I kind of went about choosing who I wanted to interview was I just made different categories of fields like journalism, politics, sports, Nobel laureates, prime ministers, athletes, scientists, and then I just filled those categories in with women that I had heard of, women that I saw on TV, women that were, in the headlines and in the news. And I just reached out to them, and that was kind of how I went about choosing who I wanted to interview. And then as for actually getting the interview, that was a very interesting process because some of them took, just a couple of days to schedule, but some of them took half a year or a whole year to schedule. Wow. Because so it was I just had to take, any time that I could get to speak with these women. So for example, my interview with Ashley Parker, she is a journalist at the Washington Post, and so she was obviously very, very busy. And so it was taking a long time to schedule an interview with her because she's just, her schedule is jam-packed. And so one day she just reached out to me. She was like, Maya, I think it was like a Sunday, and I was heading out to a party, and this was pre-COVID. But she emailed me. She's like, Maya, I'm free for the next 3 hours. I know we've been going back and forth for a while, but I'll be free for the next 3 hours, and here's my cell, so call me. And we were going to the party. My family and I, we were gonna foot out the door. We were ready to go, and I got the email, and I told everyone we gotta wait because I need to do this interview because I didn't know when, what other time she would be free. So that's kind of an example. But yeah, some of them took a couple of days to schedule, but some I had to be really patient with. And you should know I'm not a patient person. So that was something I definitely had to learn.
Awesome. Thank you. So after going through the process and talking to each of these inspiring women, who was the most fun to interview and why?
I think the most fun for me was also the most nerve-wracking, which is Dr. Janet Yellen. I was super excited to do it, but it was, she is the Dr. Janet Yellen. So I was pretty nervous for that interview. And during our call, my voice was shaking and my hands were clammy, and I had my cup of water next to me because I was so nervous to speak with her. But it was also super exciting to get to talk to such an amazing person, and she's really nice, and she was so kind, when I was scheduling an interview with her. And I think that was definitely, and it was also really exciting to hear her story and hear kind of how she, her path to where she is today. Of course, at the time, she wasn't the Treasury Secretary, but it was really interesting to hear her story and her, advice that she has for young women. So that was one of my one of the interviews that were really exciting. But I mean, there were so many women that were like Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She comes from, she has Indian heritage, and so do I. And so connecting on that was also really cool. And she, yeah, she was it was a really fun interview, that one. Oh, I think you got muted again, Georgia.
I swear I didn't even touch it. It just happened.
I know, it's so weird.
Thank you, everyone, for being patient with my silliness. So the book focuses on success stories and perseverance, but sometimes we run into roadblocks when we're pursuing our goals. Which of your interviewees had the most memorable story of a setback or a failure, and how did she overcome the issues?
That's a really interesting question, because I think actually all of these women have faced incredible setbacks, and we all experience failure. So, but I think because these are women leaders in in their fields like journalism and business and sports, because they're at the top, they are going to have to face sexism and setbacks, because there's just so many hurdles that society throws at women because they're women. But I think the story that I like to tell is of Dr. Jocelyn Bell Burnell. She is an astrophysicist at the University of Oxford, and so she, during her, I think it was during her postgraduate years, she was working under her mentor, Anthony Hewish, and she was analyzing this, some data, and she saw a little squiggle in her data, something that was a little abnormal. And she she brought it up to her mentor, Anthony Hewish, and he told her that it was artificial, it was fake, it was, nothing to worry about, nothing to dig deeper into. And, but she had been looking at this data for months and months, so she knew what the data was like, and she knew that squiggle was not something to ignore. And so what she ended up discovering were pulsars, which are one of the most important stars in the universe, because they tell scientists so much more. They are kind of used as a tool to give scientists more information about the universe. And so she, the interesting part of her story is that even though she discovered pulsars, her mentor, Anthony Hewish, got not only the credit, but also won the Nobel Prize. And so it's down in the history books that he discovered it, and he discovered pulsars. But I think a couple years ago, she did get the special breakthrough prize in fundamental physics, and she was given recognition. But it's, still that tale that we hear about a lot of women in science. The same thing happened with Rosalind Franklin when she discovered the structure of DNA. So and it's not just science. We see this in other fields as well, like journalism and sports, and all these fields come with their own sort of sexism. And so it's not these setbacks that women face isn't specific to science, but I mean, I like to tell her story, because that if I was in that situation, I know it would be incredibly difficult. Someone else was given the credit for my own discovery, and so I like to tell this story because she faced incredible adversity and was able to overcome it. And for that, I think she is an amazing person, and of course for all the work she has done.
Wow, that's incredible. So was there anyone that you wanted to include in the book that you were not able to schedule an interview with?
Yeah, there are so many. I mean, there are much more than 25 women leaders in the world. I think I definitely could have reached out to more if I had more time. I just, I kind of roughly had a deadline of getting it out before my senior year of high school, because that's a very busy year. But I think if I could have done if I were to do more interviews, one would definitely be, I would have loved to do an interview with Vice President Kamala Harris, and Michelle Obama, Amanda Gorman. She's such an amazing role model and inspiration to me. I also, something I didn't get the chance to do with Paving was talk to women in Hollywood. So I would have loved to talk to an artist, a singer, and maybe even a fellow author, actually, for this book. So yeah, there are so many, and there are not just 25 women leaders. There are so many, and I could never fit them all into a book. But yeah, there are a couple that I would definitely do.
Great. Okay, let's see. The interviews included women from a wide range of careers and industries. Were there any common themes or topics that came up during the interviews?
Yeah, there was, I think I mentioned this earlier, but these women have faced incredible setbacks, and they, what impresses me as a teenager looking up to these role models is the confidence and the grit and perseverance that they all had to and have to overcome the obstacles that are thrown at them because they're women in their respective industries. And so that was definitely a common theme that I saw. But also, I definitely saw overlapping themes in the lessons that they've learned and the advice that they shared with me. So I'll just share that here. There were about 6 kind of overlapping categories of advice that these women shared. One of them is to be curious, let your curiosity guide you. Another is being able to handle rejection and letting rejection fuel you rather than kind of pin you down. Having empathy and respect for others, and aiming higher, defining your own success, and being the change that you want to see. And I think those are kind of the 5 or 6 main overlapping pieces of advice and lessons that these women learned and shared to me in the form of advice.
What was the most difficult part of the project for you?
I think the most difficult part might have been, I'll preface this by saying the book was not something that I looked at as kind of a burden on like a weight on my shoulders to, oh, I need to schedule this interview, or, oh, I need to get back to this person, or, I have this deadline, or whatever. And so because of that, I don't think I saw any part I didn't see any part of the process as overwhelming, or, something that kind of made me want to give up. Of course, there were challenging parts, but I kind of embraced that as a part of the process because I really, really enjoyed working on this book, because it was such an incredible and rare opportunity to get to do something like this and speak to people like this. But I think maybe the most challenging part was juggling this with school. And I juggling this with all the tests and projects and homework and everything school related. But again, I didn't look at the book as this burden that I needed to, fit into my schedule, because I was really passionate about this project. And I think when you're really passionate about something, you find ways to incorporate it into your schedule. And it's kind of like my hobby. if you think about your any hobbies you have, or if there are any teenagers, high schoolers in the audience, any sports, extracurricular sports you do, you kind of do that to get away from school. It's kind of like your safe haven. And so that was what this book was for me. It was kind of a way to zone out of school and focus on something else. But I definitely think the most challenging part was juggling this with high school and all of the chaos that comes with it, with high school.
That's a really interesting perspective. So it's nice that you can face that challenge of writing as a more of a positive stressor and not a negative stressor. So I admire that. What would be some advice that you would give to young people who would like to be leaders?
I think if you pick something you're really passionate about and it can manifest itself in a different way. I think we stereotype leaders as these people who tell people different things to do and tell people I think we have this stereotype of leaders, but you can be a leader in your own way, and that can be taking charge of something you're passionate about, and that can manifest itself in its own way. For me, that was through a book. I'm passionate about girls' empowerment and women's leadership. I did not have to write a book to show that. I could have shown that passion another way. And so I think if you want to be a leader, just really go for it, throw yourself out there, and be really creative. And you just know that your passion as a leader can manifest itself in any way, and whatever you see fit as a leader.
Great. What, if anything, did you learn during the interview process that was maybe unexpected or surprising?
I think one of the biggest takeaways, I definitely learned a lot, but one of the biggest takeaways was just learning more about, so when I started the book, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. When I started the book, I indirectly started the book by interviewing the mayor of Issaquah, Mayor Mary Lou Colley, and I had no idea I was writing a book at that point. I just needed something to publish in my school newspaper, and when I decided that I wanted to write a book, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I thought I knew everything about this area of girls' empowerment and women leadership and gender diversity and gender equality, but in reality, it wasn't until I had spoken to these women and listened to their stories and their struggles, being females and being women in these in typically male-dominated fields. It wasn't until then when I really learned more about this topic and really had to dive deep into it and learn much more about it so that I could better prepare myself for the next interview. And so I think as I did more and more interviews, I started to understand this issue of gender inequality more and more. And I definitely, by asking more specific, focused, and sophisticated questions, I definitely got answers to the thoughts and ideas and questions that I was coming up with as I was learning more. And so I think I learned a lot about, why we don't have enough girls in STEM and how we get more girls in STEM, how we get more women in leadership positions, and why it's important to get women in leadership positions to act as role models for the next generation of girls. And just, steps that society should and needs to be taking to have a more equal how to have more diversity and gender equality in every area, whether that's leadership, in the classroom, in the workplace environment. It's important, whether you know it or not, to have that gender diversity and as gender equality in all those areas.
Sure. So I have just a quick question. Did you ask everyone the same questions, or was it more free form?
So I actually, I didn't ask them all the same questions. I asked them, some of them had, all of them did have the same the same sort of question worded differently, maybe about girls in STEM, and it would be focused to kind of who they were, as in, what career they're in. But I definitely did have to do a lot of research on these women before I interviewed them, so that I could ask very specific and focused questions about them. So, for example, I would ask Lindsey Vonn about her experience as an athlete and as an Olympian, and having to fall down and get back up, and getting more girls in sports and skiing. That's her sport. I asked Ashley Parker, who's a journalist, about battling bias as someone who tells people's stories. I asked Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern about the climate crisis. As a leader, how do we battle this really big crisis of climate change? And so I asked all of them pretty different questions that were specific to their field and what they do. But there was also, of course, that theme of girls' empowerment, that question that was consistently throughout all of the interviews.
Great. I threw that question at you. That was a surprise question, but I really respect your research process. That's amazing. So thank you. One more question, and then I think we might have Crystal turn it over to the audience if there are any questions. When you decided to write the book, did you have a target audience in mind? And do you feel like you've maybe reached that audience if you had a target audience in mind?
So I mean, like I said, when I started the book, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just wanted a really nice, succinct way to tell the stories of these women to more people, is what I was trying to do. More people than just, my friends and peers at my school. And so, I mean, I guess technically I did have a target audience of showing girls that, the main message of one of the messages of this book is that she did it, so can I. And I want girls to be able to see that Dr. Janet Yellen is the top economist in the world. She did it, so can I. Or, for them to see my interview with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and for girls to go, oh, there's a female prime minister. I can become her too. It's really all about that representation. And I think as I worked more and more on the book and really dove deep into this project, that was kind of the message that I wanted people to get out of the book. But because I talked to so many people, and because I asked them such different questions, there are also themes of leadership that anybody could benefit from: boys, girls, adults. And so there's also themes of, topics that are specific to their fields. So like Dr. Janet Yellen talks about economics. Mm-hmm. Ashley Parker talks about journalism. Dr. Ellen Ochoa talks about space. And so they all talk about their own sort of field. And I think that is definitely for anyone. And then for the second part of your question, do I think I've reached my target audience? It is because we're in a pandemic and, I'm doing everything virtually. I don't know, like it's a bit harder to see my audience because everything is virtual and, all I see are the people asking me questions. And so it is harder to see, if there are young girls out there or young boys, young leaders that are receiving the book and getting the message out of it. But there are people that send me messages, and my friends also really love the book, and so it's definitely harder to tell, but I think it is getting there. But I definitely wish I could have done all of this in person, and it would have been so much nicer to see everyone face to face in person and talk to them in person. I think that's much more meaningful, but here we are, and I'm of course yeah, I'm of course glad that I've got this opportunity to talk to everyone here, and of course you too, Georgia, because that's important.
If I would just stop muting myself. No, this has been amazing. I think we have some questions in the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera and mute myself. Clearly, I know how to do that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Crystal. And thank you so much. I just found this really, really interesting and really very inspiring for young people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Georgia. I appreciate it.
It's me again. Georgia, I have a small confession. I may have accidentally muted you that second time. That was me. That was not you. Okay, so
hey, Crystal, I think your audio is a little bit weird. It's for me, it's sounding a little choppy, robot-like.
All right, is this a little bit better?
Nope.
No.
Georgia, you are on for.
Okay.
You see our
let's
questions in chat, Georgia?
I'm sure everybody wants me back.
Can you see the questions that are appearing in chat?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right. So I will mute myself and take my robotic voice away.
Goodbye, robot lady. All right, well, here we go. Yay. So there is a comment that says, great interview, wonderful job, Maya. What careers are you thinking about after college?
So when I started the book process, I wasn't really, I didn't have much of an appreciation or understanding about journalism. But when I kind of dove deep into this project and even talked with fellow journalists, I definitely learned more about that field. So journalism is something I'm interested in, but actually before I had started the book process, I was and still am passionate about biology and science and medicine. So that's a whole bunch of careers I just said. But yeah, okay. I'm keeping my options open.
There you go. There you go. It's great to get experience around the world and doing lots of different things. So, you go. Was there any area of expertise that you hoped to cover and were unable to interview? Your choice.
Like a field that I was.
Like an area of expertise.
I think one of them that I missed out on, well, not missed out on because I did try, but one of them was people in Hollywood. And I think that opens up such a new and completely different perspective of barriers that women face and sexism that women face in Hollywood, because it's such a big industry and people can get to you from all different sides. So I think a singer or artist from Hollywood, actress, would have been really interesting and would have brought a really unique perspective to the book.
Great. And then the next question is, what's your next project? Another book or another path to fuel your activism?
Um, another book I would love to, but I am also in high school, so I'm focused on graduating high school. Um, but I think, the thing with paving, like I said, I really just threw myself out there and, was I didn't know I wasn't too much into literature and writing and storytelling before I started the book. And so I didn't really wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be an author and I want to write a book on, and then go search for a topic to write about. I think because I'd gone to the Women's March and because I was writing for my school newspaper and because I had done that initial interview with my mayor of my city, that's kind of what inspired me and kind of triggered me to go on this journey. So right now, like I said, I'm focused on graduating high school, and hopefully getting into college. No, I'm kidding. But I think if there was another topic that I was interested in, I would totally write about it because I think writing a book is such a cool experience.
Okay, so one more for me, and I guess Crystal has a whole bunch more questions in her chat window, but clearly she didn't give me the right permissions. But how long overall was the process for your book? So I know that you did mention that sometimes it took a really long time to schedule the interviews, but start to finish, how long did it take you to write the book?
It took me about 3 years.
Wow.
So I started in kind of the beginning of high school, I think the summer before ninth grade. And so the interviewing process, the writing process, and all that took me about a year and a half. And then the publishing process, because I published with Olympia Publishers, I didn't self-publish. That took me another year and a half. So yeah, overall it was 3 years to work on get it out and finished.
Very cool. So I think Crystal is running to try to find out if we can get some of these other questions answered. So is there anything that you'd like to share with us just about yourself in general while we're maybe waiting to get those questions?
Something about myself.
Nothing like putting you on the spot here.
I mean, this is a tricky question because there's so many things I could talk about. I guess, so one thing I get asked a lot is about kind of what I do outside of school, or sorry, not outside of school, but what I do what I do other than this book. And how I was able to just start writing the really find the right time to start the book, because I am involved in a lot of things outside of school. I'm the captain of my school robotics team. I'm in I write for my school newspaper. Like I mentioned, I run a medicine club at my school. So I'm involved in a couple of different things at school. And so people are always like, well, Maya, how did you find the time to do this? How did you find the right time to write a book? I want to write a book, but I'm in high school and I'm super busy. I think if you were to ask me that, I would tell you that just throw yourself out there. It's really hard to find the right time if there is one. For me, because I happen to be doing those three things, the Women's March, school newspaper, and that initial interview, that's kind of what snowballed, or I guess one thing led to another, and I ended up writing a book. I like I said, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Of course, it was an amazing project, and I'm so grateful for it. But to the people who are trying to find the right time to write a book or start any project, really, it's hard to just know. It's hard to find the right time to start something because we're always so busy, and I'm not sure there even is a right time to start a project. unless there's a global pandemic. um,
Right?
but I think if you just throw yourself out there and just start, it doesn't have to be in the beginning, it can be in the middle, then and you can always make something great out of it.
That's awesome. Thank you. I would bet that your family is really, really proud of you. So thank you very much for being here. I think Crystal would like to, nope, Crystal said her mic is still being uncooperative. So let's do this. I will say, Maya, thank you very much for being with us this evening. We really appreciate you kicking off Authors Out Loud 2021. It's hard to believe that 2020 is gone and here we are. I want to say thank you to our wonderful programming department. That's Crystal and her assistant, Tanya. They have worked really, really hard to put Authors Out Loud together. And we appreciate everyone being here this evening. Check out some of our other events. Maya, if you want to attend any of our events, you certainly can. That would be really cool because I think that you might enjoy some of those. And there will be a survey for everyone in the link. And thank you for being here. Crystal, did you want to try to talk to us? No? Okay. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I think it's done with. So I'll just leave.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Hi, everyone. And thank you, Georgia and Crystal. I really appreciate it.
It was wonderful having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day.